But now let's get started, and the very first step I take when working on the electronics of the vehicle is to disconnect the vehicle's battery. That is not only for safety, but also to ensure that I don't trigger any codes in the process of pulling panels or disconnecting things.
So first I'm gonna install the retaining strip. Now the retaining strip is gonna keep the fiber optic cable in place. Once I insert the retaining strip into a seam, I can feed the fiber optic cable into it so it stays in place. Now let me show you how one looks just for practice. Here's a seam. I take the retaining strip and I can push it into the seam by hand or using the spatula tool. I'll be putting a second strip right here, another retaining strip right here, and finally one more retaining strip around the shifter. Now that I practice installing the strips, I'm gonna install the very first one, and I'm gonna put this all the way as I can to the edge so I get a complete line of glow, and I'm gonna push this again with my fingers or with a spatula, both in the top and the bottom section. The other place I'm gonna put the strip is gonna be right here in the console, and same thing, I'm gonna push it as far as I can to the edge so I get a complete glow in this area. Now when it comes to the corners, I have to be careful that I don't crease this because a 90-degree turn will damage either the retaining strip or the fiber optic cable. You can see here the fiber optic cable for the top one and the fiber optic cable for the bottom one, they tuck in behind the cover. Now I did this in the passenger style in this way by tucking it in. On the driver's side, I'll show you a different way, which is I drilled a hole for the fiber optic cable. Either method can be used. And here's how I remove the passenger side cover to tuck in the fiber wire. I simply use the spatula and then pull with my fingers, and I can remove this panel and tuck in the fiber optic cable. Here is the driver's side. You can see that this strip and the fiber optic cable are a lot shorter, and instead of tucking it, I drilled a hole into the panel so the fiber optic cable comes outside of the panel. Now to remove the driver's side panel is the same process as the passenger side. I use the spatula and gently pull this out so I can feed the cable into the hole I drill.
And now that I completed installing the fiber optic portion of the kit, I'm gonna begin installing the electrical portion. And all these wires are actually hidden here in the center console. Let me show you how that looks.
To open the center console, I'm gonna grab onto both sides with my fingers and gently pull up until this section releases, which is the outer trim. I don't have to remove it, I just have to release it. Now I can grab onto the center portion and pull up, same thing, until it releases. I don't have to remove it, I just have to unlock this. Now I can move over to the back, which is the cup holder, which I'm gonna pull, and that is gonna snap right off. Once the snap is off, I can pull this to the side and reach towards the bottom where there is a connector which I can push and disconnect. Now in this little compartment right here, you can see that if I pull up on this cover, I can lift it and allows me to feed the two power cables. One power cable that powers the foot lighting and one power cable that powers the strip. I did have to cut a little window into here to allow this cover to be reinstalled correctly. And you can see here both of the plugs, one for the floor lights and one for the strip lights, and they travel into the panel and then down here into the center console. The center console is also where I hidden both of the control modules, both for the strips and the floor lighting and any excess cable.
And now that I have the cables in the center console, I'm gonna begin to send each end towards the direction where I wanna light up my strips. I'm gonna send two of them towards the passenger side because I have two light strips on the passenger side. Then I'm gonna send two more towards the driver's side because I have one strip in the upper driver's side and one strip that lights up around the AC control knobs. And finally, I'm left with one. I'm gonna keep this one in the center console because this is what's gonna light up the strip that goes around the shifter.
So this is how it looks in the car. Here's one end that powers the light that lights up around the shifter area. Now the other two ends, as I said earlier, go to the driver's side, and then two more ends go to the passenger side. But let's follow the driver's side cables. Without removing any additional panels, I just fed the cables in this direction. Now one cable continues to come up until it pops out right here. And once this cable pops up, I can make the first connection by taking the fiber optic cable, inserting it into the light source, and then turning the screw to lock it. And I only turn the screw by hand to avoid crushing the fiber optic cable. And now that the fiber optic cable is secure, I can close the panel out and reinsert the fiber optic cable into the retaining strip. You'll also notice that while I was underneath the driver's footwell, I installed the two LED light strips that provide the floor lighting. Now the light strips are just held with double-sided tape, and any loose cables were secured with zip ties to keep them away from my brake pedal or gas pedal. And the passenger side is pretty much a repeat of the driver's side. I fed the cables into this direction, no panels were removed, I just fished them by hand and I secured them out of the way with zip ties. Now this requires me to be on my back and kind of pushing the cables into the inside of the trim. Now the cables come out on the passenger side, and again you see more zip ties securing them, and now that they made it all the way up to the two fiber optic cables, I secured them in the same way as I did before by turning the little screw, making sure not to crush the fiber optic cable. You may have noticed that my fiber optic cables are covered in electrical tape, and I experimented with this just to reduce any light bleed through, but it's really not needed. Now once these two cables are secure, I can close this panel out, and I'm being careful not to crush the fiber optic cable in the process of closing it out. And on the bottom of the passenger side footwell, I did the same process as I did on the driver's side. I took the two LED light strips for footwell lighting and I stuck them with double-sided tape to this flat surface. Any loose cables were secured with zip ties just to keep them out of the way. The center console LED light source is actually concealed right here behind my cell phone mount. The cable comes up from the center, and then I hit it by pushing it into this seam in between these two panels, and you can see how it pops out in the end right here. Here's what that cable looks like before I pushed it into the trim. It just hangs like this. Now the cable in the bottom, I can push that in with my fingers, or I can use the spatula tool to completely hide it in between this area. And as you can see, once the cable is completely pushed in here, it is nearly invisible. Also notice how my cell phone holder helps to hide the light source completely. And coming back to the center console, I secure both of the modules with double-sided tape so they don't rattle around, and any excess cable I just zip tied it. Then I made the final connection from the light source to the last light strip that goes around the shifter, and I made that connection in the same way, putting the fiber optic cable and gently turning the screw until it is secured. Now I'm gonna reinstall the center cup holder. I'm gonna plug this back in until it fully locks. Then I can line this up again and then push down on both the front and the back until it locks in place. Now the trim is gonna be inserted next, but I'm gonna be careful not to crush the fiber optic cable in the process. I put the center portion in first, then I make sure that the fiber optic cable is still loose, kind of fit it in between both the inner and outer trim, and then push the outer trim to lock in place. Once the outer trim is locked in place, I can install the last strip and I can just push it in by hand. It doesn't take a lot of force, but I could also use the spatula if needed. Now the end of the fiber optic cable, I'm gonna tuck it in right here so it's hidden into the trim.